and then you match those totals up to what the machines told you. And it's a pretty good check to make sure the machines were doing what they were supposed to do. But there's a statutory requirement for it. The board has to supervise the sample audit. And that does not mean that the whole board has to be here while people are doing it. But it means that at least one board member should be part of that process. You know, ideally a bipartisan group of them is best anytime you're doing something like that. And if there's any issues on that, if you're catching a pattern at all of some kind of problem, please notify the state board as quickly as possible, because sometimes the things you would have to do to hack down here's tabulation machines may also be happening somewhere else in the state, and we need to be able to check whether that's the case and notify Homeland Security and stuff. One-stop plans. None of y'all were on the board before, right?
No.
Okay, so one-stop is becoming like an increasingly popular way to vote in North Carolina in a presidential election year like next year. Most people who vote will have voted at one-stop. And it's a good way of, one, making voting convenient, but two, helping people who like commute to work at different places vote somewhere that's a little bit more accessible, like on their way to work or whatever. But they're also very politically charged decisions a lot of times. And we work super hard at the state level that if you don't have a unanimous agreement and it kicks up to us, we're making that decision based on a whole lot of data. And we're trying to supply more and more data to y'all, because that's the best way for you to make sure that you're not just kind of falling into political lines and saying, well, we're going to stack up a whole bunch of early voting over in this area where certain population is going to be, but nothing over in that area where another population is going to be. Our answer, and even some of the parties' answers, have fortunately grown to be just do more. Like sure, you want 5 early voting sites in that whole half of the county? Well, put 5 more on the other side too. It's not going to hurt anybody. If you can afford it, or if you can argue for the funding for it, it just helps participation increase. And so it lessens the load also on voting on election day, because lines get lesser because people have already voted.
But an early voting site plan has to be unanimous among the board, right?
It does.
And if they cannot agree, then it goes up to the
Then any one board member can ask the state board to impose a plan. But there's risks with that. And sometimes county boards are like, this is great because now we got to get out of it. But once it's up to the state board can do anything at once. And so they have sometimes been like, I don't care that you don't say you have budget, you're going to go find it, and you're going to put a voting site in this little area, within this square mile. I don't care that you don't know whether there's a site available there. You're going to find one, and you're going to put it there. I mean, they'll literally do that stuff. So it's way better for a county board to do it themselves. You have more control in that process than you're ever going to have over the state board, just because they have lots of different stuff, and they're thinking about consistency with other counties. And so they'll do things that it may or may not make sense for your county sometimes, but it's consistent with what they're doing kind of statewide. And so if you don't want to get caught up in that, we really encourage you to do everything you can at the county level to get unanimous decisions out.
which means compromise.
Compromise.
Are there a lot of things that the board has to agree on unanimously? I mean, I knew about one stop, but.
The county board?
Yeah.
No.
Okay.
No, just that.
Okay.
There's a couple other small things.
Which ones? I'm trying to think.
Like, if the parties don't submit enough names for your precinct officials.
Yeah.
That's a problem we'll have, I think.
Yeah, I think y'all have been dealing with that. And the
That's
county
true.
board can pick other people, if they're unanimous. But there's no appeal to the state board, so it's really something where you're gonna need precinct officials, so you're going to have to compromise.
Right.
On the one-stop thing, one other thing I just
Yeah.
wanted to mention is there is a bill that would get rid of the 7-7 requirement only this year. And we've been monitoring it, did pass the House, and we're hopeful that it will pass the Senate. It has not passed yet, but we'll update the directors, as soon as we know anything more about that.
And I can go back to that. There's a set of like 8 different separate criteria that are part of the current law. I think it's better for you to just have the slide, but it's basically you have to have like 7 to 7. It's a 17-day period, but then there's all of these criteria to kick in, and then if you have any site in addition to the county board office, another set of criteria kick in, and then if you do a weekend, a different set of criteria kick in. But you're not going to remember it if I just go down the list anyway, so I'll just send it to you, and then the law might change, as Caitlin was saying, real quickly here. I'm skipping over all the quasi-judicial stuff because it's unlikely you're going to have to deal. Sorry.
Will we get a copy of the slides?
Yeah. That's what we'll email it. Should we just email it to Valeria? Is that should we get it out to everybody?
It's not exactly.
Okay, we'll make sure that.
Yeah, we got some of them.
Okay. And we can load them on your computer when we leave or something too, if that's better. Okay, so I'm gonna skip over election protests. If you end up having an election protest filed, we're gonna work with you real close on that.
You sure will.
We deal with them all the time, just because we deal with the whole state, right? But any given county is not gonna have that many, and I'm knocking on wood for y'all, right? But yeah, we'll work with you real close on that. I know, I'm hoping that it won't happen there. I will just hit this real quick. For any type of big voter challenge thing, or any type of massive lawsuit or protest or anything that you think is going to escalate into a major thing, where it could land in a court or land in front of you all in a major way or in front of the state board, it is really good to involve your county attorney early. And again, we work with the county attorneys a lot because they all understand that, like, hey, they're not going to be telling us secrets. We always feel bad because sometimes like a director will call and be like, you can't say that I told you this, but then, and then go on and tell us something like terrible. Of course we have to tell our board, right? Because our board has a duty, we have a duty to the board, and we don't share privilege with the director, right? So we will work with your county attorney, but like if there's something that goes down that's really, really big, you do want to let the state board know. But you may also want to let your county attorney know pretty early in the process. Because it could easily land somewhere where they're going to have to get read in pretty quick in court or whatever. And then you're going to want to have a court reporter, like somebody who can do transcription, ahead of time, just that you know who they are, so that you can call them if you had an emergency, really big proceeding in front of you, so that you could get them up to document it. And in certain circumstances, we can just have a recording and it'll just work from that. But the director, our executive director under the rules, has to approve use of recording instead of transcription. So you want to make sure on those things. But these are rare for county boards, so I'm just going to skip back through it. Public meetings. Y'all already up to speed on public meetings because I know we're at an hour and 1 minute at this point.
I think we have a better understanding after our past week,
Yeah.
we've had the county attorney here explaining this.
Oh, good. Okay. All right. Well, you'll get these in slides then. But just as the main catch-all, even though there's a lot of little technical requirements, the hope is that we can be open and transparent in as many things as we can be, unless it's compromising security or compromising personnel in some type of really specific way. We get a lot of the power that we have because people trust that we're being open and transparent about it. So even if they disagree with the result of what the county board does at any given time, they at least know that we got there in a way that was open and transparent to the public. And the open meetings rules and laws require us to do that and help us do that a lot. You want to hit the, I'm just going to skip through this then.
Yeah.
All the notice requirements. Sounds like y'all are already doing it perfectly.
We're not doing it perfectly, but we're trying.
Okay. All right. Parliamentary procedure. Sounds like y'all actually have it down. You were either reading from a script or you just knew it by heart, Chair. That's pretty good.
That part.
All right. Public records. You want to hit public records or?
Yeah, same thing. We'll kind of speed through this really quick. So North Carolina has some of the very broadest public records laws in the United States. Almost everything is a public record unless there's a really specific exception that allows you to withhold it. Because public records are the property of the people, the General Assembly has made the decision that most things that you make will be available to the public for free or at minimal cost. So anything received or made in connection with your official business is a public record, regardless of the way that it's stored or the medium it's in. So kind of just like speeding through this, if you're sending text messages from you to another board member on your personal cell phone, but you're texting about official business, that's going to be a public record, and if somebody asks for it, you'll have to produce it unless it's protected under one of the very specific reasons, but there's not a general exception for communication between board members. What our state board members have learned is that if you have something that you don't want to become a public record, make it in a phone call and do it that way. That's a reality that people have to live with because it can be difficult dealing with the fact that our documents are so open to the public.
Yeah, and it was hard even with the investigation stuff. A lot of our stuff was open to the public, and that's just how that works for most things that we do.
But I don't know how often there's requests made here for public records, but I have made requests for public records, and what I found is that I get there's no rule about how long I can take to produce these public records.
So there are records retention schedules that are made by the Department of Cultural Resources that tell you for every type of document how long it has to be retained for. So, for example, a lot of records from federal elections, like ballots, poll books, things like that, have to be retained for 22 months. For municipal elections, if there's no federal candidate on the ballot, it's only going to be 2 months. So there is a specific schedule for that, and if you have questions about it, we can send you a link to where those records retention schedules are.
Are you talking about? I understood your question to be more that they don't have to turn it around within a certain amount of time. Is that what you mean?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah. It doesn't say a particular number of days, but we're supposed to act as quickly as possible, or as expeditiously as possible, which can vary. I mean, if it's in the middle of an election, that might be a week.
Right.
Whereas if it's not, it could be a day. If you got nothing else to do, you don't have a reason to not produce that record.
Yeah, I think a lot of this we can probably see through.
Most of this.
So if we were communicating with each other through text on our personal cell phone, would that make everything on our cell phone public records, or just things related to the board?
That's right. It would just be things related to the board of business, and the requirement is that you preserve those communications for whatever the records retention period it is. So if it's you texting a board member about, setting up a time to meet to talk about something, the retention for that's not going to be very long because it doesn't have a lot of administrative value.
But if somebody texted you and said, I just got information that XYZ went down at that polling place, and then this turns into a huge investigation, the administrative value of that little text can be really, really high. And that can end up even having historical value, in which case it needs to be retained indefinitely.
Yeah, so that could be screenshotting or however, if you can email a lot of times if you've got, your board members use their personal emails for board member communication, you can forward that email to, somebody who works in the county board of elections office who can retain it for you, for example, if you're not going to be on the board anymore.
That's a good way to do
We
it.
all agree that we're going to set up specific email accounts just for board business.
Good.
That's great, and that makes it really easy because everything on that is going to be subject to the public records laws.
That's right.
So we should hit this really quick, there are some things that are either not a public record, and if they're on a document somebody requests that you need to redact them. So it's a voter signature, that can be viewed in your office, but somebody can't copy it or take a photograph of it. So if somebody wants to see the container return envelope, the absentee ballot came back in, and they want to see the voter signature, they need to view it in your office, and you need to have a staff member there with them to make sure that they're not taking a picture of it or not tracing over it, so they'll have it. Because it is important to protect voter signatures, since that's the way that we verify, that the person is who they say they are. Other things that are confidential are date of birth, driver's license number, CID identifier on the absentee ballot, email addresses for UOCAVA voters, where somebody registered, if it was at an NBRA agency, so like if there would be a little code like somebody registered at WIC or at DSS, that needs to be redacted. I think there's a few more.
There is.
Confidential voter address, social security number, voted ballots, those are obviously confidential and they're subject to additional restrictions. A court order is required if somebody wants to see a voted ballot, so it's something that's very difficult to get because we do have to protect the secrecy of the ballot even when they are retrievable. Attorney-client communications, attorney work product, personnel records, and criminal investigations.
We'll say though that you're often not going to be the ones conducting a criminal investigation. If you have a sense that there's something that criminally went on, you would be working closely with the state board, but the state board has both the mandate but also resources, investigators that it's hired and things who have experience in election crimes to come out and do whatever it is that's necessary to do. But it is an exception.
That's right. And y'all know that, more than most other boards from
Yeah,
things
that's
that
right.
y'all had to deal with.
That's right. As
That's-
promptly as possible is the wording.
Right.
To answer your question.
I'm done with that.
Yeah,
On the
sure.
other side.
I'm sure.
So you have to provide the public record in the medium that the person requests. So if they want, you to email them some particular record, then you need to do that and not make them come in and pick a copy on the CD, for example. There's very limited ability to charge for costs. It's generally limited to what the actual cost is of copying or something like that, and you can't charge for redactions. If you do have questions about this, that's a good thing to consult your county attorney on because they deal with that with other entities that they advise for the county.
That's right. You can't charge for the cost of redaction, so if it's like you have to hire an attorney or something to redact, you You can't bill out their billable.
Yeah.
Pass it on.
Yeah, which most of what we provide on public records at super time consuming tends to be redactions, but that's just the reality.
Cost you business. Yep.
Yeah. And a court can make a losing party pay court costs, and that can be personally assessed against an individual if they willfully violate the public records law.
That's right. So if you're intentionally deleting stuff so that it can't become a public record and it's sought, or if you are intentionally, once it's asked for, you're just not producing it. If you know that to be unlawful, which you do now because we just told you that, they can come after you and you would actually have to pay for their attorney's fees in collecting against you, and that's personal. That's not like assessed against the county.
So if I made a request for public record from the county and they refuse to provide it,
If they don't have an exception,
It's not such a.
yeah, that would be the question. Is there an exception for it? Exception.
Yeah, and there are other exceptions that we don't have in the presentation. The ones we go over are the ones that are most relevant for you as a county board of elections, but you can go to the chapter in the general statutes for more information about that.
You want to skip to don'ts since we're
Yeah,
running over?
we're good.
Get to the don'ts. They're fun. Go for it.
Okay, don't micromanage your director, so you are responsible for supervising the director, like we've said, and setting expectations for them, but that doesn't mean that you should be in the office from 8 to 5 every day, looking over your director's shoulder, and making sure they're doing every little thing that they need to do. If you have concerns about what your director is doing, and if they're fulfilling their requirements, then that's something that your board can address, but it's not appropriate for you to be acting as another staff member when you're a member of the county board, not a staff member.
These are all things that have happened, by the way.
That's right, yeah. Passing resolutions on your deputy director's weight, yeah, that really did
That was
happen.
a real thing. It's a real
Not
thing.
appropriate.
Not appropriate.
Passing over a qualified applicant to hire a pickle plant driver. So our executive director will ask questions if county board of elections recommends a director who does not appear to be qualified. You know, we have problems when we get directors who are not qualified, and so we try and avoid that on the front end. Deadlocking on who will be vice chair. This also happened. As I said, vice chairs, when that existed, did not have any statutory duties, so that was particularly concerning when county boards couldn't even agree on something like that.
And it was only a 4-member board back then. And so that meant that every person was actually voting against themselves in order to deadlock on who the fourth vice chair would be. Just absolutely crazy.
Okay.
Don't hold office in
Yeah.
a political party.
Went over that before.
District executive committee, we went over that. Don't post religious slurs on your office door or other public spaces. Don't wear offensive costumes for any type of holiday that might come up. Don't post racial slurs or sexist comments on Facebook. Again,
These are just sad examples.
Yeah.
Don't be an example like that. All right. And I would say on the micromanagement of the director, I think that what we're trying to get at there is that frequently there will be a board member or two sometimes that have more time than anybody else or more interest in day-to-day activities. And that can sometimes outweigh the rest of the board just because that person happens to be present. Right? And so if they start getting in a relationship with the director where it's really one-on-one, like I need you to do X, Y, and Z, or you should do it this way because I said so, know that when you act together as a board, you have all the power in the world on how your office functions and how elections in your county run, consistent with state and federal law. But any one member doesn't have any power. So if you are individually trying to decide for the board how things are supposed to go, that's what's off limits. That's the micromanagement that we're talking about that's a problem. Setting out as a board clear guidance, decisions that take away certain discretion from the people that you hire, that's absolutely fine. When you act as a board, you are certainly within your rights, and it's better sometimes for the whole county because it has to be done in an open and public way. So it's a lot more transparent. But you just want to be on guard. You want to have an open line of communication with the people that are in the office so that they can let you know, hey, so-and-so is stopping by 3 times a week. You know, it's distracting to some of my staff, and they're just telling me what they want me to do. We deal with it at the state level sometimes. You know, I mean, I've had 5 chairs in my time of being up at the state board as the general counsel. And we always have to be on guard and let our board members know, like, hey, that's great, but can you do that in a way that gets the buy-in from the rest of the board? Because I'm happy to do it, but I can't do it just because you told me. It has to be the board acting as the board. A chair is a chair when you're chairing a meeting, right? You walk out that door, you're not a chair of anything, right? So, I know, not to motivate you, I promise, but that's what we're getting at. So we'll send you these slides because most of the stuff that we didn't have to cover, you'll just have as reference material. But this is where you would email us if you're trying to look for an answer. It's this legal@ncsbe.gov, and we'll get back to you on it. Grateful, y'all.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I just have a couple of things. If we're aware of an issue in which we're not in compliance with state law, as an example, some of our precinct judge assignments, which did not work out.
Okay.
Is there a process by which we report that to the state?
I mean, I understand that y'all have been working with Veronica or someone on her team with these issues, right? So it's something that we're aware that the composition was not in compliance with the law. So certainly working with the elections team is a way that you can make us aware of that, but which we want to be aware, but ultimately it's your responsibility as the county board, to fix the problem. If you've got, all 3 of your judges or 2 of your judges who are not residents of the precinct, that's something that y'all need to find people who are going to be able to fill those positions if, the parties aren't giving you the recommendations you need.
Is there ever, I'm sorry, along those same lines, if there's ever a time when we just can't work it out to be exactly like it should be, do we let you know then, or do we
Definitely.
continue?
You still let us know, for sure.
Right.
And we want to know regardless. If you're already working with Veronica, you don't have to send up an email to the legal team.
Yeah, we talk to Veronica every day.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
we know a lot of the issues that y'all been dealing with.
Or if you put in a ticket and we have a ticketing system because there's just hundreds of inquiries a day that come up through our elections team. If you've already put in a ticket or something, you've done your due diligence in letting us know. But ultimately, I think what Caitlin was saying is basically you have the responsibility to rectify it. Similarly, we've had situations right here. We have a board member sending us pictures of keys hanging on the wall, right? That's great. We appreciate being notified, and that becomes a material part of an investigation and even comes up in a hearing later, right? It's good that we have that. It's great that we have that. But at the same time, that's a board member. You see something that looks problematic, you take those keys off that wall, you give them to the staff member and say, these keys don't go back on that wall, right? Like they're like at the fundamental level, it's not just about telling Raleigh and then making sure that Raleigh gets involved. At the end of the day, you have stewardship over this place, right? Like this county can trust its elections because you all are running it. And that's important, and you gotta safeguard that, right? But it also means that you have a lot of power, especially when you're acting as a board and not just as individuals, to set things right. Fortunately, y'all have been willing to serve at a time where you knew going into this that there was a lot that needed to be set right.
Yeah.
And we're grateful for that.
If there become, like, we're talking about funding issues, for example, there's a lot of things that Homeland Security audit recommended need to be done for election security.
Right.
And county commissioners are not willing to fund those things. If we get into that kind of difference, and our attorney is the county attorney as well, what's the process for that?
So you want to try to get as much of what you can funded through the regular channels, because those are the folks who you're gonna have to go to maintenance those things later on, right? Okay, like we did that upfront funding, but this is the maintenance cost later. You're gonna have to build that into your budget.
Yeah.
But if there are particular things that are really vital and that are important for you all to ensure the security of your office or public credibility in the security of your office, our executive director, Kim Strack, has committed to trying to figure out a way to use certain federal funds on kind of a one-time type of emergency basis to make sure that we can come